I only planned to say thank you and survive Thanksgiving dinner, but my aunt's 4 words turned the dining room into a crime scene, because if she actually gifted me a Mercedes-Benz, then someone had transformed $52,000 into a rusty bicycle and played me for a fool. The irony was sharp enough to cut. They chose the worst person to hide money from. My name is Piper Evans, and I am 36 years old. I have spent the last 10 years of my life tracking down invisible money, following digital breadcrumbs through the darkest corners of corporate ledgers, and exposing people who think they are smarter than a bank audit. I can look at a spreadsheet and tell you within 5 minutes if a CFO is buying a second home in the Caymans, or if a payroll manager is inventing phantom employees. I see patterns where other people see static. I hear the rhythm of fraud before I even see the numbers. But nothing in my career prepared me for the silence that fell over my mother's dining room table that Thursday night. It was Thanksgiving. The setting was aggressive in its perfection. My mother, Diane, lived in one of those suburban neighborhoods where the lawns are manicured with nail scissors and the mailboxes probably cost more than my first car. The air inside the house was thick, almost suffocating, layered with the heavy, sweet scent of roasted turkey, caramelized yams, and enough cinnamon to choke a horse. It was the smell of a home that was trying too hard to convince you it was happy. The chandelier above us cast a golden, buttery light over the table, catching the gleam of the good silver, the heavy forks and knives that only came out when we had an audience. And we certainly had an audience. My Aunt Marjorie Kincaid sat at the head of the table, opposite my mother. Marjorie was the family matriarch in every sense that mattered, primarily because she held the purse strings and possessed a spine made of titanium. She was 70 years old, but looked a decade younger, dressed in a silk blouse that probably cost $3,000, her silver hair coiffed into a helmet of intimidation. Marjorie did not tolerate mediocrity. She did not tolerate mistakes, and she certainly did not tolerate cheapness. I sat between my mother and my younger sister, Lila. Lila was glowing, or at least, she was shimmering with that high-gloss finish she had perfected for social media. She was engaged to be married to a man named Ethan, who sat across from her, looking polite and vaguely bored. The table was set for a celebration. We were supposed to be thankful. We were supposed to be a family. I decided to play my part. I decided to be the good daughter, the grateful niece, the successful professional who had taken a few days off from the grime of forensic accounting to bask in the warmth of her kin. I picked up my crystal wine glass, the stem cool and delicate against my fingers. The Cabernet swirled dark and red. Catching the candlelight, I stood up. The chair legs scraped softly against the hardwood floor, a sound that seemed loud in the quiet rhythm of chewing and swallowing. Everyone looked up. My mother's smile was tight, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes, just a stretching of skin over teeth. Lila looked up from her plate, her eyes wide and innocent, or perhaps just vacant. Marjorie set down her fork and knife with precise, parallel alignment and gave me her full attention. "I would like to make a toast," I said, my voice steady. I had practiced this. Keep it short, keep it sweet, sit down, eat the bird, go home. To family. It is rare that we can all get together like this, especially with work being so busy for everyone, and specifically, I wanted to say a huge thank you to Aunt Marjorie. Marjorie inclined her head slightly, a regal acknowledgement. "I received the package you sent to my apartment last week," I continued, forcing warmth into my tone. "The bicycle. It was certainly a surprise. I know you want me to be more active, get out from behind the desk. So, thank you. It was a very thoughtful gesture to send a bicycle." I expected a nod. I expected a polite, "You are welcome, dear." I expected the conversation to drift back to Lila's wedding plans or the texture of the mashed potatoes. I did not expect the air to be sucked out of the room. Aunt Marjorie did not nod. She did not smile. She froze. It was a total arrest of motion. Her hand, which had been reaching for her water glass, stopped in midair. Her eyebrows, usually arched in permanent judgment, knitted together in a frown of genuine confusion. She looked at me as if I had just started speaking a dead language. The silence that followed was not peaceful. It was heavy. It pressed against my eardrums. It was the sound of a glitch in the matrix. Bicycle? Marjorie repeated. The word tasted foreign in her mouth. She said it with the same disdain one might say roadkill or audit. I blinked, my smile faltering just a fraction. Yes, the bicycle, the vintage one. It arrived on Tuesday. Marjorie turned her entire body toward me. The confusion in her eyes hardened into something sharp, something cold. Piper, I did not send you a bicycle. My mother, seated to my left, made a sudden, sharp movement. Her hand jerked, and her fingers clamped around the stem of her wineglass with such ferocity that her knuckles turned instantly white. It looked painful. It looked like she was trying to strangle the glass. Across the table, Lila, who had been taking a delicate sip of water, suddenly choked. It was a violent, wet sound. She coughed, sputtering, grabbing a napkin and pressing it to her mouth, her eyes watering. Ethan patted her back with awkward, rhythmic thumps, but Lila waved him off, her face turning a blotchy red. I looked at them. I looked at the white knuckles. I looked at the coughing sister. And then I looked back at Aunt Marjorie. You didn't? I asked, my voice dropping an octave. But the card, it had your name on it. It said you wanted me to exercise. Marjorie let out a short, incredulous laugh. It was a dry sound, devoid of humor. Exercise? Piper, I sent you a graduation gift for your promotion. I sent it 2 weeks ago so it would be there before the holiday. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine with the intensity of a laser sight. I sent you a Mercedes-Benz, a brand new C-Class sedan, white, with a red bow on the hood. The sentence hung in the air over the roast turkey. I gave you a Mercedes-Benz. In my line of work, we call this the crack. It is that singular moment when the fabricated reality fractures and the ugly truth bleeds through. It is the moment you find a secondary ledger hidden in a subfolder. It is the moment a timestamp doesn't match the surveillance footage. It is the sound of a lie breaking its back under the weight of facts. I heard that crack now. It was louder than the clinking of silverware. My mind, trained by a decade of hunting financial deception, instantly abandoned the warm, fuzzy script of family dinner. The part of my brain that loved my mother and sister shut down, and the part of my brain that dismantled criminals woke up. It was a cold, purely analytical shift. I felt my heart rate slow down. My vision sharpened. I replayed the last 10 seconds. Marjorie. I sent a Mercedes. Reality. I received a rusted second-hand bicycle. Discrepancy. Approximately $50,000. I looked at my mother. Diane Evans was staring at her plate as if the secrets of the universe were written in the gravy. She was not breathing. Her chest was perfectly still. The tension in her neck was so extreme that the tendons stood out like cords. She was terrified, not embarrassed, terrified. I looked at Lila. She had stopped coughing. But she wasn't looking at Marjorie. She was looking at Mom. Her eyes were darting back and forth, panic radiating off her like heat waves. She looked like a child who had just broken a vase and was waiting for the parent to notice. A Mercedes, I repeated, my voice flat. I set my wineglass down. I did not drink. I needed a clear head. Dumb question, Aunt Marjorie. But are you sure? Am I sure? Marjorie's voice rose. The insult of the question seemed to galvanize her. I went to the dealership myself. I signed the paperwork. I arranged the delivery service. I paid the insurance for the first 6 months. Do you think I am senile, Piper? Do you think I would confuse a German automobile with a bicycle? No, I said softly. I don't think you are senile. I have the receipt, Marjorie declared, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. I have the transfer confirmation. I have the delivery tracking number that said it was signed for. Signed for? I echoed. Yes, signed for by you. Or at least, that is what the notification said. Marjorie looked at me, her expression softening just slightly, shifting from anger to concern. Piper, If you didn't get the car, where is it? I looked down at the tablecloth. It was white linen, crisp and clean. A single drop of red wine had splashed from someone's glass, probably my mother's shaking hand, and was blooming like a small, dark flower near the centerpiece. $50,000, gone, replaced by a piece of junk worth maybe $20 at a scrapyard. This wasn't a shipping error. Shipping companies lose packages. They don't replace luxury sedans with rusty bicycles and forge gift notes about exercise. This was deliberate. This was calculated. This required access. It required knowledge of the delivery window. It required someone who knew I wouldn't be home to receive it personally. It required interception. I looked at my mother again. "Mom," I said. Diane jerked her head up. Her face was pale, the blush she had applied earlier standing out in stark, artificial patches on her cheeks. "What?" she snapped. Her voice was too high, too brittle. "Why are you looking at me? This must be a mistake, a delivery mistake. You know how incompetent those drivers are these days. Remember when they delivered the neighbor's package to us last year? It happens all the time. They delivered a toaster to the wrong house." "Mom," I said, my voice dangerously calm. "They didn't swap a car for a bike." "Well, I don't know," she said, waving her hand dismissively, nearly knocking over the salt shaker. "Don't ruin dinner. Piper, we can sort this out on Monday. It's Thanksgiving. Let's not talk about material things. It's rude." "Rude?" Marjorie interjected. Her eyes narrowed. "Diane, I spent a fortune on that gift. It is not material things. It is grand larceny if it is missing." Lila finally spoke up, her voice trembling. Maybe it's just a prank? You know? Like a surprise before the real surprise? Maybe the car is coming tomorrow?" She offered a weak, watery smile. "Piper, you always take things so seriously. I bet it's just a joke." "A joke," I said. "A $50,000 joke." I looked at Lila's hand resting on the table. On her finger sat an engagement ring the size of a hailstone. I had wondered about that ring. Ethan was a junior analyst. He did okay. But he didn't do 3 months' salary equals a small house, okay? And Lila? Lila was an influencer with 5,000 followers who mostly posted photos of latte art. The math had never added up. Now, suddenly, the equation was balancing itself in my head. I felt a coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't anger yet. It was clarity. It was the feeling I got when I finally matched the shell company to the CEO's home address. It was the feeling of knowing. They thought I was stupid. That was the part that stung. They thought because I lived 3 hours away, because I was the quiet one, because I didn't care about luxury brands, that I wouldn't notice, or maybe they thought I would be too polite to make a scene. They counted on the social contract of the Thanksgiving dinner to keep me silent. They weaponized the holiday against me. They chose the wrong victim. I hunt people who hide assets for a living. I find money that doesn't want to be found. And my own family had decided to play a shell game with me. I picked up my fork. The metal felt heavy and cold. I didn't eat. I just held it, grounding myself. "I don't think we should wait until Monday," I said. My voice was low, devoid of emotion. It cut through the room like a scalpel. "Piper, please," my mother hissed. "Not now." "Actually, Mom, now is the perfect time," I said. I turned to Aunt Marjorie. "You said you have the tracking information? And the VIN number?" "I have everything on my phone," Marjorie said, pulling her reading glasses out of her purse. She was all business now. The aunt who baked cookies was gone. The investor was here. "Good," I said. I looked back at my mother. Diane refused to meet my eyes. She was staring fixedly at the turkey, as if wishing she could crawl inside it and hide. Lila was texting furiously under the table. Her shoulders hunched. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on the table, invading the polite space of the dinner setup. "If the car was delivered," I said, enunciating every word, "then it has to be somewhere. Cars don't vanish. They leave trails. They have registration. They have GPS. They have keys. It's probably just a paperwork error, Ethan chimed in, trying to be helpful, or perhaps trying to defuse the bomb ticking in the center of the table. I'm sure it's at the dealership. No, I said, keeping my eyes on my mother. The card on the bike was handwritten. It mimicked Aunt Marjorie's handwriting. But the slant was wrong. Marjorie writes with a vertical axis. The note on the bike slanted left. Marjorie looked at me, impressed. I do write vertically. And, I continued, the tracking number on the bike box was a reprint. Someone peeled the original label off something else and taped it on. I saw the glue residue. The room was silent again. The air conditioner hummed in the background, a low drone emphasizing the lack of conversation. So, I said, someone took the car. And someone sent the bike to distract me, to make me think the gift had arrived so I wouldn't go looking for the Mercedes. That is ridiculous, Diane snapped. Who would do that? That is what I intend to find out, I said. I stood up again. This time, I didn't raise a glass. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I unlocked it and placed it on the table. Screen up. I can access the Department of Motor Vehicles database from here. It is public record if you know where to look. If that car was registered to anyone in this state, I will find it in about 5 minutes. I looked at my mother. Unless someone wants to tell me something before I hit search? Diane turned her head away. She picked up her wine glass and drained it in one long, desperate swallow. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at Marjorie. She looked at the wall. Her jaw set, her eyes glassy and shifting, darting everywhere except at her daughter. Mom? I asked. Is there any reason why I shouldn't check the registration right now? She didn't answer, but the silence that came from her side of the table was louder than a confession. It screamed, and just like that, Thanksgiving was over. The investigation had begun. 12 days before the turkey cooled on the dining room table and my family imploded, I was sitting in my apartment in Chicago. It was 6 a.m. The city outside my window was nothing but a wall of gray fog, the kind that swallows skyscrapers and muffles the sound of traffic until the world feels like it has been wrapped in damp cotton. Inside, the only light came from the 3 monitors arranged in a semicircle on my desk. I held a mug of black coffee that had gone cold 20 minutes ago. My eyes were dry, burning with the specific fatigue that comes from staring at spreadsheets for 9 hours straight. I work for a firm called Cipherloom Financial Forensics. We are the people companies call when the numbers stop adding up and the internal auditors start sweating. My job is not glamorous. I do not kick down doors. I do not carry a gun. I carry a forensic imaging drive and a terrifying knowledge of how people try to hide their greed. I track wire transfers that dissolve into shell companies in the British Virgin Islands. I reconstruct deleted ledgers. I find the digital fingerprints left by employees who think they are clever enough to siphon off fractions of pennies or invent vendors that do not exist. That morning, I was deep into the accounts of a mid-sized logistics firm in Ohio. The CFO had been purchasing shipping containers that never arrived, from a supplier that operated out of a residential mailbox in Nevada. It was clumsy work, amateur hour. I was almost offended by how easy it was to spot the pattern. A novice could have seen the repeated invoice numbers and the round dollar amounts. People rarely steal in random numbers. They steal in thousands or hundreds. They like zeros. Zeros feel safe. I was just about to flag a transaction for $50,000 when my phone buzzed against the mahogany surface of my desk. The sudden vibration made me jump. I looked at the screen. Lila. My younger sister never called me at 6 a.m. Lila barely called me at 6 p.m. Lila operated on a schedule that revolved entirely around brunch, Pilates, and curating her Instagram feed. If she was calling me at this hour, it usually meant one of 2 things. 1, she was in jail. 2, she needed money to avoid going to jail. I picked up the phone, bracing myself for a crisis. Is everything okay? I asked. My voice was raspy from disuse. Piper! Good morning! Her voice was bright, too bright. It sounded like she was smiling so hard it hurt. There was a frantic, sugary quality to it that set my teeth on edge immediately. It was the voice she used when she was trying to charm a bouncer or convince Dad to upgrade her credit limit. It is early, Lila, I said, rubbing my temple. What is wrong? Nothing. Nothing is wrong, she chirped. I was just thinking about you. I know how hard you have been working lately. Mom told me you are on a big case. You must be exhausted. I leaned back in my ergonomic chair, narrowing my eyes at the glowing screens in front of me. Lila had never in her life expressed concern for my fatigue. To Lila, my job was a boring abstraction that paid for the occasional nice dinner when I visited. I am fine, I said cautiously. Just finishing up some analysis. Why are you awake? Oh, wedding planning. You know, it never stops. She let out a little forced laugh. But listen, Piper, I was looking at flights for Thanksgiving. Have you booked yours yet? Not yet, I said. I was going to do it this weekend. Okay, well, do not, she said. The speed of her response was instantaneous. It was like she had the sentence loaded in the chamber, waiting to fire. Excuse me? Don't book it, she repeated, her voice dropping into a register of faux concern. I was looking at the prices, Piper, and they are insane. It is like $800 for a round trip. That is robbery. And honestly, Mom and I were talking, and we just feel so bad dragging you all the way out here when you're so busy. You sound so tired. We don't want you to burn out. I sat very still, on my screen. The cursor blinked next to the fraudulent invoice. You do not want me to come home for Thanksgiving because the flights are expensive? I asked. And because you need rest, she added quickly. Honestly, Piper, take the weekend for yourself. Get a massage. Sleep in. We can do a Zoom call while we cut the turkey. It will be just like you are there, but without the TSA stress. Mom agrees. We just want what is best for you. I did not say anything for a long moment. Lila Evans was a woman who once made me drive 4 hours through a snowstorm to bring her a specific pair of heels she had forgotten for a sorority formal. She was a woman who believed the world existed to service her whims. The idea that she would sacrifice my presence, which usually meant an extra pair of hands to help cook and clean, for the sake of my rest was statistically impossible. Lila, I said slowly, I can afford the flight, and I have plenty of vacation days. I was looking forward to seeing everyone. But it is such a hassle, she insisted. There was a tightness in her tone now. The sugar was cracking. And honestly, the house is a mess. We are doing some renovations in the guest room. You would have to sleep on the couch. It would be miserable for you. Just stay in the city. Relax. Please, do it for me. I would feel so guilty if you came all this way just to sleep on a lumpy sofa. The guest room is under renovation? I asked. Mom did not mention that last week. It was a sudden decision, mold, or a draft. Anyway, it is torn up. Look, I have to go. Ethan is calling me. Just promise me you will stay home and relax, okay? Love you. The line went dead before I could respond. I stared at the phone. The screen went black. I turned back to my work. But the rhythm was gone. The numbers on the screen no longer held my attention. My brain, trained to detect anomalies in data, was now processing the anomaly in my sister's behavior. Variable A, Lila is selfish. Variable B, Lila is suddenly concerned about my well-being and finances. Variable C, Lila is actively discouraging me from entering the family home. The equation did not balance. I tried to shake it off. Maybe she was right. Maybe the house really was a mess. Maybe she just wanted a quiet holiday without her nerdy older sister analyzing the budget for the wedding. I took a sip of cold coffee and grimaced. 30 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. A text message. From Diane Evans. I opened it. Hi, honey. Lila mentioned she spoke to you. I agree with her. You work too hard. Don't worry about coming down for Thanksgiving this year. It is just going to be a quiet dinner. And I know how much you hate the travel chaos. Save your money and get some sleep. We can do Christmas instead. Love you. I read the text 3 times. My mother is a woman who treats attendance at family holidays as a mandatory court summons. If I missed a holiday, I usually heard about it for the next 6 months. She would make passive-aggressive comments about how some people prioritize their careers over their blood. For her to voluntarily release me from the obligation was not just unusual, it was unprecedented. It was a coordinated effort. Lila had called, Mom had texted. They had clearly conferred. They had a strategy. The objective of the strategy was to keep Piper Evans inside her Chicago apartment and away from the suburbs. In my line of work, we have a saying: if a company refuses to let you see a specific ledger, that is exactly the ledger you need to read. If a manager tries to block you from entering a warehouse, that is where the missing inventory is. Resistance is information. When someone tries to push you away, they are protecting something. They are creating a perimeter. I minimized the spreadsheet I was working on and opened my personal calendar. I looked at the dates. I had the time off. I had the frequent flyer miles. There was absolutely no logistical reason for me not to go. So why were they building a wall? I stood up and walked to the window. The fog was starting to lift slightly, revealing the gray steel skeletons of the buildings across the street. I thought about the last few months. I had not seen them since the summer. Communication had been sporadic. Lila was busy with the wedding. Mom was busy with whatever Mom did. The only person I had spoken to regularly was Aunt Marjorie. Aunt Marjorie. A week ago. Marjorie had called me. She sounded excited, which was rare for her. She told me she had sent a gift, a significant gift. She said she was proud of my promotion to senior forensic analyst. She said she wanted to give me something that matched my achievements. She didn't say what it was, only that it was on its way and that it required a signature. I want you to have something that reflects your worth. Piper, she had said. God knows your mother never understood it. I looked back at my phone. Lila, Mom, the sudden renovations, the concern for my wallet, the barrier. If I didn't go home, I wouldn't see them. But more importantly, I wouldn't see the house. I wouldn't see the driveway. I wouldn't see the mail. A cold prickle of suspicion walked up my spine. It was the same sensation I felt when I found a duplicate invoice in the Ohio logistics case. It was the sense that the surface reality was a thin veneer over a rotten structure. They were not trying to save me money. They were trying to buy time. I walked back to my desk and sat down. I closed the work files. I opened a new browser window. I pulled up the airline website. Lila was right about one thing. The direct flights were expensive. $580 for a coach seat. I did not care. I booked the ticket, then I booked a rental car. I chose a standard sedan. Nothing flashy. I did not text my mother back. I did not call Lila. I looked at the text message again. Save your money. I have always been the practical one, the one who saves, the one who drives a 10-year-old Honda, the one who fixes things rather than replacing them. My family relied on that. They relied on Piper being predictable, Piper being sensible, Piper doing what she was told because she wanted to keep the peace. But they forgot what I did for a living. I do not keep the peace. I keep the record. I realized then that I was looking at this wrong. This was not a family dispute. This was an investigation. And in an investigation, you do not announce your arrival to the suspects. You do not ring the doorbell and ask if they are hiding evidence. You show up when they are not looking. I felt a shift in my chest, the warmth of sisterly affection, the desire to be a good daughter, began to cool and harden into something more durable. It was a protective layer. If they wanted me to stay away, I had to go. I pulled up a blank document on my screen. I typed 3 names: Diane, Lila, Marjorie. I stared at the names. Marjorie was the outlier. Marjorie was the source of the funds. Marjorie was the one who respected me. Diane and Lila were the ones coordinating to keep me away. Therefore, whatever was happening involved Marjorie's resources and my mother and sister's greed. I picked up my phone and typed a reply to my mother. Thanks, Mom. You are right. I am swamped. I will probably just stay here and sleep for 3 days. Have a great Turkey Day. Send photos. I hit send. It was a lie. It was the first lie I had told my mother in years. But as the text bubble turned blue, I didn't feel guilty. I felt tactical. I was going home, but I was not going as a daughter. I was going as an auditor, and God help them if I found a discrepancy. The next morning, the buzzer to my apartment rang with the abrasive, demanding tone that usually signaled a delivery driver who was double parked and losing patience. I was already awake, fueled by a restless night and the lingering adrenaline of my decision to crash my own family's Thanksgiving. I pressed the intercom button. "Delivery for Piper Evans," a voice crackled through the speaker, distorted by static. "Large package, requires signature." I buzzed him in. I stood by the door, waiting. My mind briefly entertained the possibility that I was wrong. Perhaps Aunt Marjorie had sent a heavy box of her famous expensive cookware, or maybe a designer piece of luggage for my travels. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to open the door and find a thoughtful, high-value item that proved my paranoia was just an occupational hazard. The elevator dinged. I opened my door. A man in a brown uniform was wrestling a large, awkward shape out of the elevator. He looked exhausted. He was dragging the object rather than carrying it, the metal scraping against the hallway tiles with a sound that made my teeth ache. "Piper Evans?" he asked, panting slightly. "That is me," I said. He shoved a digital pad in my direction. "Sign here. Sender is Diane Evans." "My mother, not Marjorie." I signed the pad. The driver kicked the kickstand of the object down, muttered a quick, "Have a good one," and retreated into the elevator as if he wanted to distance himself from the delivery as fast as possible. I looked at the gift. It was a bicycle, but to call it a bicycle was an insult to engineering. It was a ruin on two wheels. It was a teal-colored cruiser, the kind popular in the 1950s, but it looked like it had spent the last 30 years submerged in a swamp. The paint was flaking off in large, scab-like patches, revealing the oxidized brown metal beneath. The chain was not on the gears. It hung loose and greasy, draped over the pedal crank like a dead snake. The front tire was completely flat, the rubber cracked and gray with age, puddling sadly against my welcome mat. And the basket, the white wicker basket attached to the handlebars, was crushed on the left side, as if someone had taken a baseball bat to it. I stared at it. Tied to the rusted handlebars with a piece of cheap curling ribbon was a cream-colored envelope. I didn't touch the bike. In my line of work, you learn very quickly that you do not contaminate the scene until you have documented the initial state. I stepped closer, leaning in to read the card without laying a finger on the paper. The handwriting was familiar. It was my mother's script. Loopy, decorative, and chaotic. Piper. Aunt Marjorie was worried you sit at a desk too much. She wanted to send you this so you can get some fresh air and exercise. Enjoy. Love. Mom. I straightened up and let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. The audacity was breathtaking. It was almost impressive in its laziness. Aunt Marjorie Kincaid was a woman who once sent a caterer back to the kitchen because the spacing between the cucumber slices on the tea sandwiches was inconsistent. Marjorie was a woman who believed that presentation was a moral imperative. She did not buy used things. She did not buy damaged things, and she certainly would not send her niece a tetanus hazard and call it a gift. If Marjorie had wanted to send me a bike, it would have been a custom-made Italian road bike made of carbon fiber, delivered by a specialist who would fit the seat height to my inseam. This rusty heap was not a gift. It was a prop. It was a placeholder designed to occupy the space in my mind where a gift from Marjorie was supposed to exist. It was a physical lie. I pulled my phone from my pocket. I did not unlock it to text my mother. Instead, I opened the camera app. I began to photograph the bicycle with the same clinical detachment I used when documenting a falsified expense report. I took a wide shot, showing the bike in relation to my door. I moved in for close-ups. I photographed the flat tire. I photographed the rusted chain. I photographed the crushed basket. Then, I moved to the shipping label plastered on the crossbar of the frame. This was the most interesting part of the carcass. The label was a standard shipping sticker, but something was wrong with the edges. I zoomed in with my phone, using the macro lens setting. The label was peeling slightly at the top right corner. Beneath the clean white paper of the current label, there was a residue of dark, gummy adhesive. The glue was thick and uneven, not the smooth, machine-applied strip you see on professional logistics labels. Someone had peeled this label off another box and slapped it onto the bike. I tilted my head, catching the light. There were fingerprints trapped in the adhesive on the underside of the peeling corner, smudges of oil and dirt. It was hasty work. It was the work of someone who was in a rush to get the object out of their garage and onto a truck. A professional shipper would have printed a new label. A desperate family member would have reused an old one. I took 5 photos of the label from different angles. Then I looked at the damage on the bike's neck, right where the handlebars met the frame. There were deep, fresh scratches in the rust. The metal there was shiny, indicating the abrasion was recent. It looked like someone had tried to scrub off a serial number, realized it was too much work, and gave up. I knelt down, careful not to let my pajama pants touch the greasy chain. I shone my phone's flashlight onto the bottom bracket of the frame, flipping the phone upside down to catch the stamped numbers. SN44902. I snapped a picture. I stood up and looked at the bike again. It was pathetic. It was a physical manifestation of what my mother and sister thought of me. They thought I was someone who would accept trash and say thank you. They thought I was someone who wouldn't notice that the gift was an insult. But there was more. Why send it now? Why today? I unlocked my phone and opened the app that controlled my building's amenities. As a resident, I had access to the logs of the front door camera for security purposes. It was a feature designed to help tenants find stolen packages or see who buzzed their apartment when they weren't home. I scrolled back to 10 minutes ago. The video feed was grainy, but clear enough. I saw the delivery truck pull up to the curb. It was a generic white van, not a major carrier like FedEx or UPS. It was a local courier service, the kind you hire for same-day delivery within the state or neighboring regions. The driver got out. He went to the back and hauled out the bike. But then I saw it. Just as the delivery truck had pulled up, a second car had idled right behind it, a dark sedan. It sat there, engine running. While the driver unloaded the bike, I watched the screen. The delivery driver buzzed my apartment. He waited. The window of the sedan rolled down about 2 inches, just enough for someone to watch. Once the driver entered the building with the bike, the sedan waited. It sat there for the full 3 minutes it took for the driver to come up to my floor, get my signature, and leave. When the driver walked back out to the street and got into his van, the sedan's window rolled up. As the van pulled away, the sedan followed it. It was an escort. They were making sure the package was delivered. They were making sure the evidence was planted. My stomach turned cold. This wasn't just my mother being cheap. This was an operation. They needed to establish a paper trail. They needed a signature from Piper Evans acknowledging receipt of a gift from the family. If I signed for the bike, I was technically signing for the gift from Marjorie, in a court of law, or in a family dispute. They could say, "But we sent it. She signed for it. If she didn't like it, that is her problem. But she received it." They were swapping the assets. The Mercedes, the asset worth $50,000, was being diverted. The bike, the asset with negative value, was the decoy. If they were willing to go to these lengths to fake a delivery, the money involved was gone. You do not hire a courier and a chase car to hide a misunderstanding. You do it to hide a theft. I looked at the bike one last time. It disgusted me. Not because it was ugly, but because it was a betrayal made of metal. I stepped back into my apartment and closed the door, leaving the bike in the hallway. I would deal with moving it later. Right now, it was safer outside my sanctuary. I walked to my desk and sat down. My hands were steady, but my mind was racing at 1,000 miles per hour. I needed to respond. If I stayed silent, they would get suspicious. They would wonder if I had figured it out. I needed them to think I was the same old Piper, naive, grateful, and easily manipulated. I needed them to think the ruse had worked. I opened the text thread with my mother. I typed carefully, "Mom, the bike just arrived. Wow, it is certainly vintage. Tell Aunt Marjorie thank you. I will definitely get some exercise with this." It was a surprise. I read it over. It was perfect. It was polite. It was vague. It confirmed receipt without confirming satisfaction. It fed their ego. I hit send. Almost immediately, 3 bubbles appeared. She was watching her phone. She was waiting for the confirmation. "I am so glad you got it," she replied. "Aunt Marjorie just wants you to be healthy. Put it to good use. We love you." I stared at the words. "We love you." They looked different now. They looked like a negotiation tactic. I put the phone down. I turned to my computer monitors. I brought up the photos I had just taken, the peeling label, the serial number, the crushed basket. I created a new folder on my encrypted drive. I named it Project Thanksgiving. I dragged the photos into the folder. Then I downloaded the video clip from the security feed of the delivery truck and the escort sedan. I saved that too. I leaned back in my chair. My aunt had tried to give me a car. My mother and sister had intercepted it, kept it, and sent me a piece of junk from a dumpster to cover their tracks. They had likely sold the car, or Lila was driving it, or they had used it as collateral for the loans Lila definitely had. They had taken a symbol of my aunt's respect for me and turned it into a joke. I felt a smile tug at the corner of my mouth. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter who just found fresh tracks in the snow. "Okay, Mom," I whispered to the empty room. "You want to play games with inventory? Let's play." If they could swap the gift, they could swap the money. And if they could swap the money, they had to move it. And if they moved it, they left a trail. And I am the best tracker in the business. I closed the laptop. I had a plane to catch. And I had a rust-covered bicycle to verify against a police database of stolen goods. Because I was willing to bet $500 that my mother didn't even buy the bike. She probably stole that too. The rusty bicycle was still sitting in the hallway, a physical insult, but I was done looking at it. Physical evidence is messy. It can be argued away. A mother can claim she bought a bike at a garage sale and forgot the condition. A sister can claim a delivery driver swapped it, but digital footprints do not lie. Data does not have memory lapses. Data does not try to gaslight you at the dinner table. I sat down at my desk and woke up my primary workstation. The 3 monitors flickered to life, bathing my face in a cool blue glow. I cracked my knuckles and exhaled. It was time to go to work. First, I logged into my primary bank accounts. I scanned the transaction history for the last 30 days. Checking, savings, money market. I was looking for a deposit. If Aunt Marjorie had sent a gift that was meant to be a car, there was a chance she had wired the money directly to me, and someone else had intercepted the funds to buy the car for themselves. The ledger was clean. My paycheck from Cipherloom, automatic payments for rent, utilities, insurance, a few coffee shop charges, no large influx of cash, no $50,000 wire transfer. That meant Marjorie hadn't sent cash. She had bought the physical asset herself and transferred the title, but to transfer a title to me, or to put a car in my name, you need information, you need a driver's license number, you need an address, you need insurance verification. I switched tabs to the security settings of my bank portal. Most people only look at their balance. I look at the metadata. I look at the invisible handshake between the user and the server. I clicked on Device Login History. My own devices were there. My desktop, my laptop, my phone. All originating from Chicago IP addresses. But there was a flag in the Archived Sessions folder. 3 days ago, at 2 a.m, there had been a login attempt. It was successful. The IP address did not resolve to Chicago. It resolved to the suburbs of Philadelphia. My mother's house. I stared at the screen. They had my password. That was not surprising. I had probably written it down for Mom years ago when I helped her set up her iPad and never changed it because I didn't think my own mother would hack me. But a login isn't a theft. I needed to see what they did. I went to the Alerts and Notifications tab. Nothing. I went to Profile Changes. Nothing. Then I went to a submenu that most users don't even know exists. Authorized User Requests. There it was. A request had been initiated 72 hours ago to add an authorized signer to my account. The name on the request was Diane Evans. The status said, pending verification, but then, oddly, it had been moved to canceled hidden 4 hours later. Why would they cancel it? Unless they didn't cancel it, unless they used a loophole to bypass the waiting period, or they found a different way to get what they needed, like a power of attorney. If they had a forged power of attorney, they wouldn't need to wait for the bank's digital authorization. They could just walk into a branch or upload the document. I needed the raw logs. The interface was too clean. It was hiding the messy details. I picked up my phone and dialed the bank's premier support line. I didn't call the fraud department. If you call fraud, they freeze everything. If they froze the account, Mom and Lila would get a notification that suspicious activity had been detected. They would panic. They would shred documents. They would delete texts. I needed them to feel safe. Thank you for calling Chase Sapphire Support. This is Michael. How can I help you? Hi, Michael, I said. My voice was breezy, calm, the voice of a woman ordering a latte. This is Piper Evans. I am just doing some end-of-year tax prep for my accountant. I noticed a weird glitch in my authorized user tab. I think I might have accidentally clicked something a few days ago. Could you do me a huge favor and email me the full change history log for the last week? I just want to make sure I didn't mess up my own settings. Sure thing, Ms. Evans. Let me just verify your security question. What is the name of your first pet? Buster, I said. Perfect. One moment while I generate that report. I waited. I could hear him typing. Okay, it looks like there was a request for a Diane Evans, Michael asked. But it shows as voided. Right, that is the one, I said. My mom helps me with bookkeeping sometimes, but we decided not to go that route. I just need the log to show my accountant that no actual access was granted, just for compliance. Makes sense. Sending that PDF now. Thanks. Michael, you are a lifesaver. I hung up. The email pinged 2 minutes later. I opened the PDF. It was a raw system log. I scrolled down to the timestamp of the voided request. There was a note in the system comments. Document uploaded. Durable power of attorney. User verified via upload. Access granted pending final review. My blood ran cold. They hadn't canceled the request because they gave up. They canceled the digital request because they had uploaded a legal document instead. A power of attorney allows someone to act as you, to sign for you, to buy cars in your name, to accept gifts in your name. If they had forged a power of attorney, they had crossed the line from messed up family to federal felony, but I still needed to know where the money went, or rather, where the car went. I closed the banking tab. It was time for OSINT, open source intelligence, in my job. Social media is the greatest snitch in history. Criminals have a psychological need to brag. They steal money to buy things, and they cannot enjoy those things unless they show them to an audience. I opened Instagram. I went to Lila's profile. Lila Evans, lifestyle, beauty, manifestation. Her feed was a vomit of pastel colors and carefully staged affluence. There were photos of her holding a matcha latte with a manicure that cost more than my electric bill. There were photos of her and Ethan at a tasting menu dinner. I scrolled back 2 weeks. Wedding prep is so exhausting, but so worth it. Thank you to my amazing fiancé for spoiling me. I scrutinized the photos. I was looking for reflections. I was looking for backgrounds. I found a photo from 3 days ago. Lila was standing in front of a bridal boutique, holding a garment bag. She was beaming. In the background, parked at the curb, was a white car. It was cut off by the edge of the frame. I could only see the rear bumper and a taillight. I took a screenshot and dropped it into my image analysis software. I adjusted the contrast and sharpened the edges. It was a Mercedes taillight. The specific curve of the LED strip belonged to the current year C-Class, but that could be anyone's car. It was a public street. I kept scrolling. I found a story she had posted 24 hours ago. It was a video, but it had expired. However, Lila, being Lila, had saved it to a highlights reel titled Blessings. I clicked on Blessings. The video played. It was Lila doing a fit check in a driveway. She was spinning around, showing off a new coat. Obsessed with this weather, she squealed in the video. She spun around, and for exactly 0.5 seconds, the camera panned past the driveway. There it was. Parked right next to Ethan's beaten-up Honda Civic was a gleaming, pristine, white Mercedes-Benz C300. I paused the video. I scrubbed through frame by frame until I got the clearest image. It was not just a white car. It was brand new. It didn't have a permanent metal license plate yet. It had a paper temporary tag taped to the inside of the rear windshield. I zoomed in. The resolution was grainy, but I could make out the dealership logo on the trunk. Prestige Motor Cars of Willow Creek. That was the dealership 10 miles from Aunt Marjorie's estate. I zoomed in closer on the rear passenger window. There was a white square stuck to the glass. The window sticker. The price sheet that comes on new cars. People usually peel those off immediately, but Lila was lazy. Or maybe she wanted people to see the price. I couldn't read the text, but I could see the shape of the layout, and I could see the reflection of the sun hitting the side mirror. I took a screenshot. Then I noticed something else. Lila was leaning against the car in the next frame. She had her hand resting on the hood. I zoomed in on her hand. She was holding a key fob. It wasn't the jagged metal key for Ethan's Honda. It was a smooth, black, teardrop-shaped fob with a silver circle in the center. The Mercedes logo. I sat back. The puzzle pieces clicked together with a satisfying, terrible sound. Aunt Marjorie goes to Prestige Motor Cars. She buys a white Mercedes C300. She intends it for Piper Evans. Somehow, the paperwork gets diverted. A power of attorney is forged or misused to intercept the title. The car is delivered to my mother's house, not my apartment. Lila takes the keys. Lila posts the car on Instagram, captioning it, "Blessings," assuming that since I am blocked from her close friends list, or simply because she thinks I am too busy working to check her highlights, I will never see it. Then, to cover the gap, they send me a rusty bike with a fake note, hoping I will just say thanks and never ask Marjorie about the details. It was stupid. It was incredibly, arrogantly stupid. But it was also effective, provided I didn't come home, provided I didn't ask questions, provided I stayed in Chicago and acted like the doormat they thought I was. I looked at the photo of Lila leaning on my car. She looked so happy. She looked like she deserved it. "If Aunt Marjorie gave you a Mercedes," I murmured to the screen, "then why is it in your driveway, Lila?" I knew the answer. Because they didn't think I would fight back. I closed the browser. I checked the time. It was 8:15 in the morning. I opened the airline website again. There was a flight leaving O'Hare at 11:30. I could make it if I left now. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't need clothes. I needed to be light. I needed to be fast. I booked the ticket. One way. $580. I grabbed my laptop bag. I put my encrypted hard drive in the side pocket. I put the folder with the printed bank logs and the screenshots of the Instagram photos in the main compartment. I walked to the door. I looked at the bike one last time. I took the note off the handlebars, the one with my mother's handwriting. I folded it carefully and put it in my pocket. That was the final piece of evidence. The intent to deceive. I walked out of the apartment. I didn't lock the deadbolt. I didn't care. I took the elevator down to the lobby. The doorman, Ralph, looked up. "Going somewhere, Ms. Evans? You just got a package." "I have to return it." "Ralph," I said. My face was a mask of absolute calm. "There was a shipping error." "Oh, that's a shame. You going to the post office?" "No," I said, pushing the door open to the gray Chicago morning. "I am going to the source." I hailed a cab. "O'Hare Airport," I told the driver. "Terminal 1. And please, hurry." As the cab merged into traffic, I pulled out my phone. I saw a text from Lila. "Hey, did you get the bike? Mom is dying to know if you like it." I didn't reply. Silence is a weapon. In a negotiation, the person who speaks first loses. In an interrogation, the silence makes the suspect nervous. It makes them fill the void with truth. I was going to bring a lot of silence to that dinner table. I watched the city blur past the window. I wasn't Piper the sister anymore. I wasn't Piper the daughter. I was the auditor. And I was coming to close the books. The drive from the airport to my mother's house usually takes 45 minutes. I made it in 30. I drove the rental car with a kind of mechanical precision, my hands resting lightly on the wheel. my eyes scanning the familiar suburban landscape that was rapidly scrolling past the window. The manicured lawns, the colonial-style houses with their three-car garages, the decorative flags waving in the November chill. It all looked the same as it had for the last 20 years. It was a facade of perfect, quiet wealth. But now, I saw the cracks in the brickwork. I saw the leverage behind the mortgages. I turned onto Oak Creek Drive. My heart did not pound. My palms did not sweat. I felt a cold, dense gravity in my chest, the specific weight of knowing something that everyone else is desperate to keep hidden. I pulled into the driveway, and there it was. It is one thing to see a photograph of a crime scene. It is another thing entirely to stand in the middle of it. The white Mercedes-Benz C-Class was parked right in front of the garage, taking up the prime spot, blocking the path for anyone else. It gleamed under the gray autumn sky, aggressive and beautiful. It looked like a trophy. I put the rental car in park and killed the engine. I sat there for a moment, just looking at it. The dealer plates were gone, replaced by the temporary paper tag I had seen in the video. The car was real. The theft was real. The audacity was tangible. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled of wood smoke and dried leaves. It was the scent of Thanksgiving, a smell that usually made me feel nostalgic. Today, it just smelled like burning. Before I could even reach for my bag, the front door of the house swung open. My mother, Diane, stood there. She was wearing a cashmere sweater the color of oatmeal and dark trousers that were perfectly pressed. Her hair was done, a fresh blowout that probably cost $100. She looked the part of the perfect suburban hostess, but she moved too fast. "Piper!" she called out, her voice pitching up at the end, turning my name into a question rather than a greeting. She rushed down the front steps, her arms open wide. She didn't wait for me to come to her. She closed the distance between us with a frantic energy. She threw her arms around me and squeezed. I hugged her back, but I kept my body stiff. She smelled of Chanel No. 5 and white wine. It was a thick, cloying cloud of scent, but as she held me, I felt it, a tremor, a fine, high-frequency vibration running through her frame. She was shaking, not from the cold, and not from emotion. She was shaking with adrenaline, the kind of adrenaline you get when the police knock on your door, or when the person you robbed pulls into your driveway. "I thought you weren't coming," she said into my ear, pulling back to look at me. Her eyes were darting all over my face, scanning for danger. "You said you were going to sleep for 3 days. You said you were busy." "I changed my mind," I said. I kept my voice level, stripped of any accusation. I realized I couldn't miss family time, and the work slowed down. "Surprise?" "Surprise," she echoed. The word sounded like a curse in her mouth. She forced a smile, but the corners of her lips twitched. "Well, we are so happy you are here. Really, it is just, the house is a mess. I wasn't prepared. The house looks fine." "Mom," I said, looking over her shoulder at the pristine facade. Then, the door opened again. Lila stepped out. If my mother was the anxious accomplice, Lila was the beneficiary who had already spent the loot. She was dressed in a silk slip dress with a chunky knit cardigan falling off one shoulder, an outfit that said, effortless, but took 2 hours to curate. Her hair was glossy. Her makeup was camera-ready. "Piper!" she squealed. She came down the stairs, but she didn't run. She walked with a conscious grace. She hugged me loosely, careful not to wrinkle her clothes or mine. "Oh my God, you actually came. I thought you were joking when I saw the rental car." "Nope, here in the flesh," I said. Then she pulled back, and she raised her hand to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. It was a deliberate movement, a staged movement. On her ring finger sat a diamond that was frankly obscene. It was an oval cut, set on a thin gold band, and it had to be at least 3 carats. It caught the flat afternoon light and threw it back with an arrogant flash. I looked at the ring. Then I looked at Lila. "Wow," I said. "That is some rock." "Lila," she giggled, fanning her hand out. "I know, right? Ethan did so good. I told him I didn't want anything big, but he insisted. He said I deserved the best. He must have had a very good year, I said. Oh, amazing, she said, blinking rapidly. Crypto and stocks, you know. Right, stocks. Behind her. Ethan Cole emerged from the house. He was wearing a navy quarter-zip sweater and chinos. He looked like every junior finance associate I had ever investigated. Clean-cut, eager, and possessing a confidence that far outstripped his actual competence. "Piper!" He came down the steps, extending a hand. "Good to see you. We were just saying it felt empty without the big sister here." I shook his hand. His grip was firm, but his palm was damp. "Good to see you too. Ethan," I said, "congratulations on the engagement. And the ring, it is spectacular." "Thanks," he said, puffing his chest out slightly. "Lila is a special girl. Had to get her something that matched her shine, right?" "Right," I said. I turned my head slightly, directing my gaze past them, directly at the white car. "And I see you treated yourselves to a new ride, too," I said. "That is a beautiful machine." The air in the driveway changed instantly. It became thin and sharp. My mother took a sudden, harsh breath. Lila froze, her hand still hovering near her hair. "Oh, that," Lila said. Her voice was too fast. It came out like a bullet. "Yeah, it's Ethan's. He just got it. For work. You know, client meetings. Image is everything." I looked at Ethan. He was still smiling, but the smile had become fixed, like a mask that didn't fit quite right. "Really?" I asked him. "A C-class? I thought your firm had a policy about junior associates driving flashy cars to client sites. Something about not looking like you are overcharging?" Ethan blinked. He looked at Lila, then back at me. He stumbled. "Well, yeah, usually. But, I got a waiver, and actually, it's a lease, so it's not technically buying." "A lease," I repeated. "Smart, better cash flow management." "Exactly," Ethan said, relaxing slightly, thinking he was speaking my language. "Keep the capital liquid, although, honestly, Lila helped with the down payment, so it is kind of a joint investment." "Ethan," Lila snapped. Her voice was sharp, cutting him off instantly. "It is your car. Stop being humble. You pay the monthly." She turned to me, her eyes wide and hard. "He is just being modest. He pays for everything. I just picked the color." "White," I said. "It is a very specific white, diamond white bright. I think they call it. It's an extra $2,000 for that paint job." Lila stared at me. "Is it? I don't know. I just liked how it looked." "You have a good eye for expensive things," I said. My mother stepped between us, clapping her hands together. The sound was loud and jarring in the quiet driveway. Okay, enough car talk," Diane said, her voice shrill. "Piper, you must be freezing. And look at you. You are wearing that." She gestured vaguely at my outfit. I was wearing dark jeans, boots, and a structured wool coat. It was perfectly appropriate for November in the Midwest. "What is wrong with what I'm wearing?" I asked. "It is just so dreary," Diane said, grabbing my arm and pulling me toward the house. "And you look tired. You have bags under your eyes. Come inside. I want you to go upstairs and freshen up. Put on something festive. Didn't you bring that red dress I bought you 3 years ago?" "No," I said. "I didn't bring the red dress." "Well, find something," she insisted, propelling me up the stairs. "Dinner is in 2 hours, and Aunt Marjorie will be here soon. You know how she is about presentation. I don't want her making comments about you looking like a tired accountant." I let her pull me. I let her guide me into the house. The interior was warm and smelled heavily of roasting turkey and sage. It was the smell of my childhood, but now, underneath the sage, I could smell the rot. "Go," Diane said, giving me a little shove toward the staircase. "Upstairs. Your room is ready. Ethan, Get Piper's bag from the car. I have it, I said, gripping the handle of my rolling suitcase. I can manage. Don't be silly. Let him help, Mom said. I said I have it, I said. My voice dropped just a fraction. It wasn't loud, but it was absolute. Diane flinched. She looked at me. Really looked at me. For the first time since I arrived, she saw something in my eyes that she didn't recognize. She saw the auditor. Okay, she whispered. Okay, just hurry up. I walked up the stairs. I could feel their eyes on my back. I could feel the silent communication passing between them, the panicked looks, the silent mouthing of what does she know. I reached the top of the landing and walked down the hall to my old bedroom. I opened the door. It was exactly as I had left it. The faded posters were gone, but the furniture was the same. The twin bed, the oak desk where I used to do my homework, the window that looked out over the driveway. I walked to the window and looked down. Lila and Ethan were standing by the Mercedes. They were arguing. I couldn't hear the words, but I could read the body language. Lila was gesturing wildly at the house. Ethan was holding his hands up in a surrender motion. My mother was standing on the porch, watching them, wringing her hands together as if she were trying to wash them clean. I turned away from the window. I lifted my suitcase onto the bed. I didn't unzip the main compartment where my clothes were. Instead, I reached for the hidden zipper in the lining, the one that led to the document pouch. I pulled out a thick manila folder. It was heavy. It contained the printouts of the bank logs, the screenshots of Lila's Instagram, the photos of the rusty bicycle, the analysis of the VIN number, the copy of the forged power of attorney request. I laid the folder on the bedspread. It looked out of place against the floral quilt. It looked like a weapon. I opened the main compartment and took out a blazer. I changed out of my coat. I brushed my hair. I applied a layer of red lipstick, war paint. I checked my reflection in the mirror. I didn't look like a tired accountant. I looked like someone who was about to foreclose on a house. From downstairs, I heard a sound. Pop. The distinct, festive sound of a champagne cork leaving a bottle. Then, laughter. It was nervous laughter. A bit too loud. A bit too high-pitched. But it was laughter nonetheless. Cheers, I heard Ethan say. To us. Lila's voice floated up the stairs. And to pulling it off. They were toasting. They were drinking champagne in a house they couldn't afford. Celebrating a car they had stolen. Wearing a ring bought with diverted funds. While the victim was upstairs in her childhood bedroom. They thought the danger was over because I was in the house. They thought that because I had hugged them, because I hadn't screamed in the driveway, that I had accepted the lie. They thought they had successfully managed the Piper problem. I touched the edge of the file folder on the bed. Drink up, I whispered, because that is the last glass you are going to enjoy. I closed the folder and tucked it under my arm. It felt solid. It felt righteous. I turned off the light in the bedroom and walked toward the door. The hallway was dark, but the light from the dining room spilled up the stairs, casting long, distorted shadows against the walls. I began my descent. I walked down the stairs, the manila folder of evidence tucked securely inside my laptop bag, which I left by the door, and rejoined the party. The atmosphere in the living room was a performance art piece titled Everything is Fine. My mother had cranked up the jazz music, likely to fill the silence that threatened to swallow us whole. Lila was sitting on the arm of the sofa, swinging her legs, while Ethan poured another round of champagne into crystal flutes that I recognized as Aunt Marjorie's wedding gifts to my parents from 30 years ago. I accepted a glass. I did not drink. I just held it, using it as a prop to blend into the scenery. So, I said, keeping my voice light, tell me about the wedding. You guys have been secretive on the group chat. Lila lit up. It was a reflex. You put a camera or a compliment in front of her, and she performs. She hopped off the sofa and grabbed a stack of glossy brochures from the coffee table. Oh, Piper, it is going to be insane, she gushed, spreading the papers out over the ottoman. We looked at the country club, but it was too pedestrian, so we are going with the Gilded Estate. I looked down at the brochure. The Gilded Estate was not a wedding venue. It was a compound. It was the kind of place where celebrities got married to avoid the paparazzi. The cover photo showed a ballroom with ceilings high enough to fly a kite in. That looks expensive, I noted. Quality costs money, Ethan said, taking a sip of his drink. He checked his watch. It was a heavy, stainless steel diver's watch. He had checked it 3 times in the last 10 minutes. He wasn't checking the time. He was checking his escape window. I leaned forward, pretending to admire the venue photos, but my eyes were scanning the paperwork scattered underneath. There was a contract partially covered by a bridal magazine. I shifted the magazine with my pinky finger, just a millimeter. Deposit received. $15,000. Payer. Evans Family Trust. My heart skipped a beat. We didn't have a family trust. We had a checking account that Mom constantly complained was empty. If there was a trust, it was news to me, or, more likely, Evans Family Trust was a fancy name they had slapped onto a new account to launder the incoming assets. I looked at Mom. She was sitting in the wingback chair, her phone placed face down on her knee. Every few seconds, it would vibrate against the fabric of her pants. She wouldn't look at it. She would just place her hand over it to silence the buzz. People who have nothing to hide leave their phones face up. People who are terrified of a notification popping up that says, "Transfer denied," or "Urgent," "Bank fraud alert." Keep their screens hidden. Lila was the opposite. She was glued to her screen, her thumbs flying across the glass, but she wasn't posting. I watched the reflection of her screen in the window behind her. She was in her photo gallery. She was selecting images. Tap, 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 delete. She was scrubbing the timeline. She was deleting the photos of the car. "It looks beautiful, Lila," I said. "Really, top tier." "Thanks," she said, not looking up. "We just want it to be perfect." "I am going to step out for a second," I said, setting my glass down. "I have a bit of a headache from the flight. I just need some cold air." "Do not be too long," Mom said quickly, her hand tightening on her face-down phone. "Aunt Marjorie will be here in 20 minutes. "I will be right back," I promised. I walked out the front door and closed it softly behind me. The silence outside was sharp and cleansing. The sun was beginning to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the driveway. The white Mercedes sat there, glowing in the twilight like a ghost. I looked back at the house. The curtains were drawn. They couldn't see me. I moved fast. I walked to the rear of the Mercedes. I took my phone out and snapped a high-resolution photo of the temporary tag taped to the rear windshield. I zoomed in on the screen. In the state of Pennsylvania, temporary tags usually list the dealership and the expiration date in big letters, but in the fine print, in the bottom left corner, they list the registrant. I squinted at the image. Registrant. D. Evans. POA. There it was. 2 inches of thermal-printed text that unraveled their entire lie. Ethan didn't lease this car. D. Evans, Diane Evans, had registered it, and the POA suffix meant she had done it using a power of attorney. They had used my name, or Aunt Marjorie's name via a proxy, to secure the vehicle, and then titled it to Mom. I moved to the front windshield. I covered the glare with my hand and photographed the vehicle identification number plate on the dashboard. W1KWH8. I had the DNA of the car. I stepped back, pretending to stretch, just in case a neighbor was watching. I tapped on my contacts list and found a number I hadn't used in 2 years. Sarah. She was a claims adjuster for a major auto insurance firm. We had worked together on a massive insurance fraud ring in Detroit. She owed me a favor. I hit call. "Piper?" Sarah's voice was surprised. "I thought you were a ghost." "Hey, Sarah. I need a quick reality check. Off the record. I am billing you for this. What is it? If a vehicle is purchased with a power of attorney and then immediately insured under a temporary policy, does that trigger a notification to the original grantor of the power of attorney?" "Depends on the bank," Sarah said. "But usually?" "No. The whole point of a POA is that the person acts as the principal. The system thinks the principal is standing there signing the papers. Why? Who is scamming who?" Just a hypothetical, I said, watching the front door of my mother's house. And Sarah, do new luxury cars, specifically Mercedes, have telematics that track location before the owner even sets up the app? Oh, absolutely, Sarah laughed. Those things are spies on wheels. The dealership can track them. The bank can track them. Why? Is the car missing? Not missing, I said, looking at the white sedan. Just misplaced. Thanks. Sarah? I hung up. So, the car was tracking itself. That meant there was a digital log of exactly when it left the dealership and exactly when it arrived at this driveway. I walked back toward the house. I didn't go in the front door immediately. I walked around the side, near the kitchen window. The window was cracked open slightly to let out the heat of the oven. I pressed my back against the siding and listened. She is acting weird. Mom, Lila's voice hissed. It was low, but the panic gave it a caring quality. She is always weird, my mother's voice replied. It sounded strained. She is an accountant. They are all socially awkward. No, it is not that. She keeps looking at things. Did you see her looking at the brochures? What if she asks about the deposit? She won't ask, Mom said. She thinks we have savings. Just keep her talking about the wedding. Do not talk about the car. And for God's sake, tell Ethan to stop checking his watch. He looks guilty. Is she really back? Lila whispered. Like, really back? Or is she going to leave tomorrow? She stays until I say she can go, Mom said. We need her to sign the thank you card for Marjorie in person. Once Marjorie sees Piper and the gift together, the loop is closed. Then Piper can go back to her sad little apartment. I closed my eyes for a second. Sad little apartment. My apartment was paid for with money I earned. It was clean, and it wasn't a crime scene. I moved away from the window. I had heard enough. I walked back to the front door and entered the house, bringing a gust of cold air with me. Brr, I said, rubbing my arms. It is getting chilly out there. They both jumped. Mom was at the oven. Lila was at the sink. They spun around with matching expressions of guilt. Oh, you are back, Mom said, forcing a smile that looked painful. Dinner is almost ready. Great, I said. I am starving. I walked through the kitchen, my eyes landing on the back door that led to the garage. Propped against the wall, near the recycling bin, was a stack of old magazines and junk mail, and right on top of the pile was a brochure. Kincaid Youth Initiative. Pedals for Progress. I stopped. The Kincaid Youth Initiative. That was Aunt Marjorie's personal charity. She ran a program that collected used bicycles, refurbished them, and gave them to underprivileged kids in the city. I thought about the rusty teal bicycle sitting in my hallway in Chicago, the one with the serial number SN4492. I felt a sudden, electric connection in my brain. I pulled out my phone and pretended to check a text. In reality, I was opening the browser. I typed in Kincaid Youth Initiative Bicycle Donation Tax ID. I found the charity's public page. They had a gallery of recent restorations. I scrolled, and there it was. In a photo dated 3 months ago, there was a row of bicycles waiting to be refurbished. Third from the left was a teal cruiser with a white basket. It was the exact same bike. The rust pattern on the fender was identical. But here was the twist. The caption under the photo read, "Donations ready for the scrap metal drive. These units were deemed unsafe for repair and are scheduled for recycling." My mother hadn't just bought a cheap bike. She hadn't even gone to a thrift store. She had gone to Aunt Marjorie's charity warehouse, where she likely volunteered or had a key, and she had taken a bike from the trash pile. She had stolen garbage from her own sister's charity to give to her daughter, so she could keep a Mercedes-Benz for herself. The level of disrespect was so profound it was almost artistic. They took a $50,000 car from Marjorie, and to cover it up, they gave me a $0 piece of scrap metal stolen from Marjorie. It was a perfect circle of theft. And the best part? The bike had a "Do Not Resuscitate" stamp on the frame in the photo. The mark I had seen on the neck of the bike, the shiny scratch where I thought someone had tried to remove a serial number. They weren't removing a serial number. They were scraping off the scrapped designation stamp so I wouldn't know it was trash. I looked at my mother. She was basting the turkey, humming a little tune, completely unaware that the gift she had sent me was carrying a digital forensic tag that linked directly back to the one person she was trying to fool. "Mom," I said. She looked up, the baster dripping juice into the pan. "Yes, honey?" "Did you volunteer at Aunt Marjorie's charity drive last month? The bike thing?" She froze. The baster stopped dripping. I popped in," she said, her voice tight. "Why?" "No reason," I said. "Just thinking it is nice that you support her causes. It shows real family loyalty." I smiled. It was a sharp, dangerous smile. Mom didn't smile back. She turned back to the turkey. But I saw her hand tremble. She knew she had cut corners. She just didn't know that I had already traced the corners back to the source. The doorbell rang. The chime echoed through the house like a gavel hitting a block. "That is Marjorie!" Lila shrieked from the living room. "Everyone look normal." I checked my watch. My pulse was steady at 60 beats per minute. I wasn't going to look normal. I was going to look like the prosecution. "I will get it," I said. I walked to the door. The final act was about to begin. I opened the door to Aunt Marjorie, played the part of the welcoming niece for exactly 3 minutes, taking her coat, complimenting her brooch, and accepting her stiff, regal hug. And then I lied. I told them I needed to check a work email that had just flagged as urgent. It was the only excuse they would believe without question because, in their eyes, I was married to my job. I retreated to the guest room and locked the door. The silence of the room was heavy, but the notification on my phone was heavier. The email from Michael at the bank support line had finally arrived, carrying an attachment that was 3 megabytes of pure, unadulterated betrayal. I sat on the edge of the bed and opened the PDF. It was titled Authorization History Logs, Secure PDF. I scrolled past the standard login data, past the device IDs I had already flagged, and went straight to the document repository section. There, embedded in the file, was a scanned image. It was a durable power of attorney. The document was dated 2 weeks ago. It was a standard legal form, the kind you can download from the internet for $20. The language was boilerplate, granting the agent, Diane Evans, full authority to act on behalf of the principal, Piper Evans, in all financial matters, including banking, real estate, and asset management. It gave my mother the legal right to be me. I zoomed in on the signature line at the bottom of the second page. There was my name, Piper Evans. It looked like my signature. It had the same sharp slant to the right. It had the same elongated loop on the P and the tight, rushed scribbles of the S at the end. To a layman, or a tired bank clerk glancing at a screen, it was a match. But I am not a layman. I analyze handwriting for a living. I look for the pressure points where the pen digs into the paper. I look for the lift-offs where the hand hesitates. I expanded the image until the ink strokes became pixelated blocks. The first thing I noticed was the flow. When a person signs their own name, they do it with muscle memory. It is a ballistic movement. The pen moves faster on the straight lines and slows down on the curves, creating microscopic variations in line width. This signature was flat. The line width was perfectly consistent from start to finish. That meant it wasn't written. It was drawn. Someone had traced it, likely using a stylus on a tablet or a backlight, moving slowly and carefully to stay within the lines of an old sample. It lacked the kinetic energy of a genuine signature. It was a corpse of a signature. But the real smoking gun was the dot. 3 years ago, after I testified in a case involving a forged will, I developed a security habit. When I sign my name on any legal document, I do not dot the I in Piper directly above the letter. I place the dot slightly to the left, tucked specifically inside the upper loop of the P. It is subtle. It looks like a pen slip. But it is my watermark. I looked at the forged document. The dot over the I was perfectly centered, hovering right where grammar dictates it should be. The forger had been too grammatically correct. I felt a cold, hard knot tighten in my stomach. My mother hadn't just stolen a car. She had stolen my consent. She had committed a felony that carried a prison sentence of up to 7 years. I swiped to the next page of the PDF. The metadata analysis of the uploaded file. The bank system records the technical properties of every document submitted. I looked at the layer composition. A genuine scan is a single, flat image layer. This document had 3 distinct layers. Layer 1, the background template of the form. Layer 2, the signature block. Layer 3, the notary stamp. I focused on the notary stamp. It belonged to a man named Gerald T. Miller. I ran a quick search on the State Licensing Board database. Gerald T. Miller had retired and surrendered his commission 6 months ago. His stamp was invalid. They had cut and pasted an old stamp from a different document, probably from the closing papers on the house refinance Mom did last year, and superimposed it onto this forgery. I could see the digital seams, the noise, the random speckles of dust and grain that appear in a scan, was different on the top half of the page than on the bottom. The top was clean, crisp white. The bottom, near the signature, had a gray, grainy cast. They had scanned 2 different pieces of paper and stitched them together. It was a Frankenstein document, and it was sloppy. I closed the document viewer and opened the transaction log that the power of attorney had unlocked. The timeline was damning. November 12th. A wire transfer of $52,000 enters an account ending in 449. This was a new account, opened that same day under my name, using the forged POA. Source of funds: Marjorie Kincaid, Revocable Trust. There it was. Aunt Marjorie had sent cash. She hadn't bought the car directly. She had sent the money for me to buy it, likely because she wanted me to have the choice of color or options. Or perhaps she just wanted to empower me. November 13th. Less than 24 hours later, a wire transfer of $48,000 leaves the account. Recipient: Lila E. Concepts, LLC. I stared at the screen. Lila E. Concepts. That was the business Lila had started 2 years ago to write off her makeup purchases and influencer trips as tax deductions. It was a shell, a vanity project. November 14th, a debit card transaction from Lila E. Concepts, LLC. Amount: $12,000. Merchant: Prestige Motor Cars. Down payment: November 15th, another transaction. Amount: $15,000. Merchant: The Gilded Estate. Wedding venue deposit. The math was brutal. They had taken Marjorie's $52,000. They put $12,000 down on the Mercedes, likely leasing it to keep the monthly payments manageable with whatever allowance Mom gave Lila. They blew $15,000 on the wedding venue. That left $25,000 unaccounted for. I scrolled further. November 16th. Amount: $5,000. Payment to Nordstrom. Amount: $3,000. Payment to Delta Airlines. Amount: $8,000. Transfer to Diane Evans' personal checking. They had stripped the carcass clean. In less than 4 days, $52,000 meant for my future had been converted into a lease, a party, a wardrobe, a vacation, and a kickback to my mother. And they did it all under my name. Technically, I had paid for Lila's wedding. I had leased the car, because the account was in my name. If Lila stopped making payments on the lease, the repo man wouldn't call her. He would call me. My credit score would take the hit. I set the tablet down on the duvet. I didn't feel the urge to cry. I didn't feel the heat of anger. I felt the cold, precise clarity of a surgeon holding a scalpel. I wasn't going to scream at them over the turkey. Screaming is messy. Screaming allows them to play the victim, to cry about how mean I am, to gaslight me about how we were just borrowing it. No, I needed to nail them to the wall with their own paperwork. I needed to make it so that if they tried to lie, they would only tighten the noose. I opened a presentation app on my tablet. I started a new project. Slide 1. The Forged Power of Attorney. I highlighted the signature and the missing dot in red. Slide 2. The Invalid Notary. Stamp status. Slide 3. The Flow of Funds diagram. Marjorie to me, fake, to Lila to Mercedes wedding. Slide 4. The breakdown of the theft. I arranged the evidence logically. It was a prosecution exhibit. It was undeniable. But I needed one last nail. I needed to make sure Marjorie was locked in. I needed to ensure that when I dropped the hammer, she wouldn't try to cover for them out of some misplaced sense of family mercy. Marjorie hated thieves, but she loved the family image. I had to make the theft so personal, so insulting to her specifically, that she would have no choice but to side with the truth. I needed to confirm the intent of the gift formally. I picked up my phone. It was Thanksgiving, yes, but Aunt Marjorie's wealth management firm had a 24-hour concierge line for their high-net-worth clients. I knew this because I had once helped Marjorie set up her mobile banking app, and she had bragged about the service. I dialed the number. Kincaid Family Office, this is the after-hours service. How may I assist you? A smooth, professional voice answered. Hello, I said, my voice steady, stripped of any holiday warmth. This is Piper Evans, Marjorie Kincaid's niece. I am currently with Marjorie for the holiday. We were discussing a recent transaction, and she wanted me to verify the reference code on a wire transfer sent on November 12th. She is concerned there might have been a routing error. One moment. Ms. Evans, let me verify your identity. Can you confirm the last 4 digits of Mrs. Kincaid's primary tax ID? I knew it. I handled her taxes 2 years ago. 9021, I said. Thank you. One moment. I waited. The hold music was classical, soothing. It stood in stark contrast to the violence of the fraud I was uncovering. Okay, I see the transaction, the agent said. Transfer of $52,000 on November 12th. Beneficiary, Piper Evans. And was there a memo line attached to that wire? I asked. Yes, ma'am. The memo reads, Purchase of vehicle, Mercedes-Benz C300, gift. Thank you, I said. That is all I needed. Is there a problem with the transfer? The agent asked, a note of concern entering his voice. Does Mrs. Kincaid need to initiate a recall? Not yet, I said. We are just reconciling the books. Thank you. I hung up. Purchase of vehicle, explicit, written in the bank wire. There was no ambiguity. It wasn't money for whatever you want. It was earmarked. By using it for a wedding and a lease, they hadn't just stolen money. They had committed wire fraud by misusing funds designated for a specific asset. I stood up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I looked at myself in the mirror. I looked calm. I looked like a dutiful niece who had just checked a work email. I picked up the tablet. I tucked it under my arm. I walked to the door and unlocked it. Downstairs, I could hear the clinking of silverware and the murmur of voices. They were sitting down. They were starting the meal without me. I walked out into the hallway. The trap was set. The evidence was compiled. The witnesses were present. I wasn't going down there to eat turkey. I was going down there to serve a subpoena. The atmosphere in the house shifted the moment Aunt Marjorie's car pulled into the driveway. It was a subtle change in pressure, like the air inside a submarine when the depth gauge drops. My mother stopped humming. Lila stopped checking her reflection in the back of a spoon. Ethan stopped pretending to be interested in the Architectural Digest on the coffee table. They were afraid of her. They were afraid of her judgment, her sharp tongue, and her absolute intolerance for failure. But today, they should have been afraid of me. I walked to the front door to greet her, beating my mother by 2 steps. It was a calculated move. I needed 5 seconds alone with the judge before the defendants could plead their case. Marjorie swept in with a gust of cold November air. She was wearing a coat that probably cost more than my first car, and she carried herself with the stiff, armored posture of a woman who has spent 40 years navigating corporate boardrooms. Piper, she said, her eyes assessing me. You look tired. City air does not agree with you. It is good to see you. Aunt Marjorie, I said, taking her coat. My mother was hovering behind me. A nervous smile plastered on her face, ready to swoop in and control the narrative. I leaned in close to Marjorie as I hung her coat on the rack, my voice dropping to a whisper that was audible only to her. When we sit down, I murmured, I am going to thank you for the gift. Please, just answer honestly. Do not cover for anyone. Just tell the truth. Marjorie frowned. a micro-expression of confusion flickering across her face. She looked at me, then at my mother, then back at me. She was sharp. She sensed the trap immediately, but she didn't know who it was for. "I always tell the truth, Piper," she said, her voice at normal volume. "Good," I said. I turned around. My mother was wringing her hands, her eyes darting between us. "Everything okay?" Diane asked, her voice pitched too high. "Perfect," I said. "Aunt Marjorie was just asking about my job." We moved into the dining room. The table was set with the good china, the gold-rimmed plates that were hand-washed only. It was a beautiful tableau of a happy family. I took my seat. I placed my tablet on the table, right next to my water glass. It was a black slate, silent, dark, but inside, it held the timeline of a felony. I had the presentation queued up. Slide 1, the forged signature. Slide 2, the bank transfer. Slide 3, the photo of the Mercedes in the driveway. I also placed my phone face down next to the tablet. I had already navigated to the contact for the bank's fraud department. I didn't need to look up the number. It was on speed dial. One tap, and a recorded line would be listening to our dinner conversation. Ethan sat across from me. He poured wine for everyone, his hands shaking just enough to clink the bottle against the glass rim. Clink, clink, clink. It sounded like a distress signal. "So, Piper," Ethan started, trying to sound casual. He took a large gulp of wine. "We were talking earlier. Cipher Loom. That is the name of your firm, right? Sounds pretty intense." "It is," I said, unfolding my napkin. "What do you guys actually do?" he asked. "I mean, is it just looking for tax errors? Or is it, deeper?" He wasn't asking because he was interested. He was performing a risk assessment. He wanted to know the caliber of the weapon pointing at him. "We follow the money, Ethan," I said, keeping my tone light, almost bored. "People think they can hide assets. They move money to shell companies. They buy crypto. They forge receipts. But money always leaves a trail. It is like water. It has to flow somewhere. My job is to find the leak." Ethan swallowed. "Right. But you need warrants for that, right? Like, you can't just look at anyone's bank account." "If I have a suspicious activity report or a client authorization," I said, locking eyes with him, "I can look at anything. I can see what you bought for lunch 3 years ago. I can see where you were when you tapped your card. I can see who you were with." Ethan paled. He looked down at his plate. "Wow, sounds invasive." "Only if you have something to hide," I said. My mother jumped in, desperate to break the tension. "Oh, let's not talk about work. It is a holiday. Piper, tell us about your apartment. Are you seeing anyone?" The classic deflection, when the conversation gets too real. Pivot to the daughter's marital status. "No, Mom," I said. "I am too busy fixing other people's mistakes." Diane's smile faltered. She stood up to get the turkey, signaling Lila to take over the distraction duty. Lila leaned across the table. She reached out and touched my hand. Her skin was soft, manicured, the hand of someone who had never scrubbed a floor or balanced a checkbook in her life. "Piper," she said, her voice dripping with honey. "Listen, I know things have been weird lately. Mom said you were stressed about the travel costs. And I know the wedding is a lot, but I really appreciate you coming. I don't want us to fight about money or gifts, you know?" She was trying to get ahead of it. She wanted to frame any potential conflict as me being cheap or jealous. "I am not fighting, Lila," I said, gently withdrawing my hand. "Good," she said, relaxing. "Because, honestly, you have so much. You have a great career. You have your own place, and I'm just starting out. Mom just wants to make sure everything is fair. You know how she is." "Fair," I repeated. "Yeah, like sharing the blessings," Lila said, using that influencer buzzword she loved so much. "So if things seem a little unbalanced, it is just because I need a little more help right now. You understand? right? She was asking me to sanction the theft without knowing that I knew it was a theft. She was asking me to be okay with the unbalance. Lila, I said, my voice dropping to a conversational murmur. There is a difference between help and taking and gifts. Gifts are funny things. They are very specific. They are easy to trace. Lila froze. Her eyes flicked to the tablet on the table. She didn't know what was on it, but she knew it didn't belong on a dinner table. What do you mean? She whispered. I mean that if someone gives you a bicycle, I said, smiling. It is easy to check if it came from a store or a trash pile, and if someone gives you a car, well, cars have paperwork. Lila pulled back as if I had burned her. She looked at Ethan. Ethan was staring at his wine glass, sweating. Diane returned from the kitchen carrying the turkey. It was golden brown, a masterpiece of culinary effort. She set it down in the center of the table with a heavy thud. Okay, she announced. Time to eat. Marjorie, would you like to carve? Or should Ethan? I will do it, Marjorie said. Standing up, she picked up the carving knife. She tested the edge with her thumb. It was sharp. I watched her. Marjorie was precise. She cut the meat in clean, uniform slices. She did not hack. She did not tear. She was the perfect executioner. So, Marjorie said, not looking up from her task. Piper, you mentioned you received the package. The room went dead silent. This was it, the moment I had requested. My mother stopped breathing. Lila picked up her water glass, her hand trembling so badly the ice cubes rattled like maracas. Ethan looked like he was about to bolt for the door. Yes, I said. I did. And? Marjorie asked. Did it fit? It was surprising, I said. But before we get into the details, Aunt Marjorie, I wanted to ask, you ordered it from the dealership near your house, right? Prestige Motorcars? Marjorie paused. She looked at me, the knife hovering over the turkey breast. Yes, she said slowly. I did. Why? Just checking the logistics, I said. Sometimes things get lost in transit, or redirected. My mother slammed her hand down on the table. It wasn't a hard slam, but it was enough to make the silverware jump. Can we please just eat? Diane snapped. Piper, stop interrogating everyone. It is Thanksgiving. Just say thank you and move on. I am trying to say thank you. Mom, I said. I just want to make sure I am thanking the right person for the right thing. You are being impossible, Diane hissed. You always do this. You have to ruin everything with your details. Details matter. Diane, Marjorie said, looking at her sister. Let the girl speak. Diane shrank back. She couldn't fight Marjorie. She needed Marjorie's money too much. I picked up my tablet. I didn't turn it on yet. I just held it. Actually, I said, I think I will wait until after the toast to say my full thank you. I want to make sure I have the words right. I saw Lila lean toward Ethan. She thought I couldn't hear her over the sound of the carving knife and the pounding of her own heart. But I have spent years listening to wiretaps where the audio is fuzzy and the voices are whispering. I have ears like a bat. Lila covered her mouth with her napkin, pretending to wipe her lips. She leaned into Ethan's shoulder. If she asks, Lila whispered, her voice a frantic hiss of air. You say the car is in your name. You say you bought it with your bonus. Do not mention Mom. Do not mention the trust. Just say it is yours. I didn't react. I didn't blink. Ethan nodded slightly. A jerky motion of his head. He was agreeing to the lie. He was agreeing to perjure himself at the dinner table. They had a script. They had rehearsed. They thought that if they claimed the car belonged to Ethan, I couldn't prove it was bought with Marjorie's money. They thought the bank secrecy laws would protect Ethan's bonus, but they forgot one thing. I had the power of attorney document. I had the registration photo with D. Evans, POA, printed on the tag. If Ethan claimed the car was his, he wasn't just lying. He was claiming ownership of an asset that was legally registered to my mother using stolen authority. He was walking right into a trap where his lie would contradict the official state record. If he said, "It's my car," and I showed the registration that said Diane Evans, their stories would collide. They would turn on each other. I smiled. It was a genuine smile this time. "Ethan," I said, my voice pleasant, "I bet you have had a really interesting year in the market. To afford a car like that? You must have hit a home run." "Yeah," Ethan croaked. Big year." "I can't wait to hear about it," I said. I tapped the screen of my tablet. The screen woke up. The glow illuminated my face. "Shall we say grace?" I asked. Marjorie finished carving. She sat down. She looked at me, then at the tablet, then at the terrified faces of my family. She knew. She didn't know the specifics, but she knew the smell of rot. "Yes," Marjorie said. "Let us give thanks for what we have, and let us be grateful for the truth." We bowed our heads. I kept my eyes open. I watched them. My mother was squeezing her eyes shut so tight her face was wrinkled. Lila was peeking at the tablet. Ethan was staring at the exit. "Amen," I whispered. The prayer ended. The war began. To understand the absolute, icy calm I felt as I sat at the dinner table. You have to understand what happened exactly 15 minutes before the doorbell rang. You have to witness the moment the last thread of my familial loyalty finally snapped. I had just come downstairs with my tablet under my arm, the digital evidence burning a hole in the screen. I was heading toward the living room to wait for Aunt Marjorie, but I never made it that far. Lila intercepted me in the hallway. She didn't look like the confident influencer anymore. The lighting in the hallway was dim, and without her ring light and filters, she looked brittle. She looked like a woman who was holding a very heavy ceiling up with very weak arms. She reached out and grabbed my elbow. Her grip was tight, her fingernails digging into the wool of my blazer. "Piper, wait," she said. Her voice was a low, desperate hiss. I stopped. I looked down at her hand on my arm until she let go. "We need to talk," she said. "Real talk, sister to sister." "I am listening," I said. She glanced over her shoulder to make sure Mom was still in the kitchen. Then she leaned in close. I could smell the champagne on her breath. It smelled sour, like anxiety. "Look, I know you are smart," Lila said, speaking fast. "I know you figure things out. I saw you looking at the car. I saw you looking at the brochures. Okay? You win. You are the observant one. Congratulations." "Is there a point to this, Lila?" I asked. "The point is, we don't need to do this," she said. "We don't need to make this a whole thing in front of Aunt Marjorie. It would kill her. Piper, she is old. She has high blood pressure. Do you really want to be the one to give her a heart attack over a misunderstanding?" "A misunderstanding," I repeated. "Is that what we are calling grand larceny now?" Lila flinched, but she plowed ahead. She reached into the pocket of her oversized cardigan. She didn't pull out a weapon. She pulled out a phone. "I can fix this," she said. "I have some money saved from my brand deals. I can wire you something right now. To make it fair." I raised an eyebrow. "You want to pay me?" "I can send you $5,000, she said. She said the number with a strange mixture of pride and pain, as if she were offering me a kidney. "Right now, Venmo, Cash App, whatever you want, 5,000. You take it, you keep your mouth shut about the car, and we all have a nice dinner. You go back to Chicago, and everyone is happy." I stared at her. $5,000. She had stolen a $52,000 asset. She had spent $15,000 on a venue deposit. She was driving a car that cost more than the average American earns in a year, and she was offering me $5,000 of my own money to buy my silence. "Lila," I said, my voice dangerously soft. "Let me get this straight. You stole $50,000 from me, and now you are offering to give me back 10% of it, and you want me to say thank you?" "It is not stealing," she whispered, her voice rising in pitch. "It is family money. It was going to come to us eventually anyway. I needed it now. My wedding is now." You are not even dating anyone. Piper, what do you need a Mercedes for? You take the subway. I need it because it was mine, I said. And more importantly, I need to know something. Lila, if you send me $5,000 right now, whose money are you sending me? Is it yours? Or is it just the last $5,000 left over from what you took from Aunt Marjorie? Lila's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She stood there, mouth agape, like a fish pulled out of the water. She couldn't answer. Because we both knew the answer. She didn't have $5,000. She had my $5,000. That is what I thought, I said. I turned to walk away. But my mother appeared from the kitchen. She had evidently been listening. She wiped her hands on a dish towel, her face flushed with that specific shade of maternal martyrdom she had perfected over 3 decades. Piper, Diane said, stepping between me and the living room. Stop being so cruel to your sister. Cruel? I asked. Mom, she just tried to bribe me with stolen funds. She is trying to make peace, Mom cried. She is trying to share. Why do you have to be so rigid? You have always been like this, so cold, so calculating. You have a good job. Piper, you make good money. Lila is different. She needs help. She is building a life. I am building a life too, I said. Just because I don't post mine on Instagram doesn't mean it doesn't exist. But you are the big sister, Mom said, throwing her hands up. Since when is it a crime for a big sister to help her little sister? Since when did you become so selfish? If you had just given her the money when she asked, we wouldn't have had to do the paperwork this way. I felt a physical blow to my chest. To do the paperwork this way. She wasn't denying the fraud. She was justifying it. In her mind, my refusal to be their endless ATM was the provocation that forced them to commit a felony. They were the victims of my boundaries. I looked at Diane Evans. I looked at the lines around her eyes, the familiar set of her jaw. I had spent my whole life trying to please this woman, trying to be the easy child, the low-maintenance child, the one who didn't cause problems, and all it had earned me was the role of the mark. I am not your daughter right now, I said, my voice hollow. I am just a line item in your budget that you decided to liquidate. Oh, stop being dramatic, Mom scoffed. It is just a car. We can transfer the title to you in a few years when the lease is up. What is the big deal? The big deal, I said, is that you forged my signature. The hallway went silent. Then, Ethan stepped out of the living room. He had been hiding, listening, but the mention of the forgery pulled him out. He looked sweaty. He looked like a man who realized the walls were closing in but thought he could still talk his way out of the building. Whoa, hold on, Ethan said, holding his hands up in a placating gesture. He moved to stand next to Lila, forming a united front. Piper, let's not use words like forged. That is a legal term. It is heavy. It is the correct term, I said. Look, Ethan said, dropping his voice to a confidential, guy-to-guy tone. The thing with the power of attorney, that was just a formality, okay? We were on a time crunch. The dealership had a quota. The wedding venue needed the deposit that day. We tried to call you, but you were working. We expedited the process. It was procedural. We were going to tell you. I froze. My brain latched onto the sentence like a pit bull. The thing with the power of attorney. That was just a formality. Ethan knew. Until this moment, I had entertained a tiny 1% possibility that Ethan was just a dumb beneficiary, that Lila and Mom had lied to him, told him the money was a gift, told him the car was legitimate. But he knew about the power of attorney. He knew they had expedited it. He knew they had signed my name. He wasn't an accessory after the fact. He was a co-conspirator. I slid my hand into my pocket. My thumb found the volume button on my phone. I have a shortcut set up. 2 quick presses on the volume down button triggers the voice memo app to start recording in the background. Click, click. The phone vibrated silently against my thigh. We were live. So, I said, keeping my face perfectly neutral, inviting him to continue. You are saying you knew about the power of attorney document? You saw it? Well, yeah, Ethan said, shrugging. He thought he was explaining away the problem. He thought he was minimizing it. I mean, Diane handled the signing, obviously, but we all agreed it was the best way to get the funds released without bothering you. It was just paperwork. Piper, just a signature to move the money from point A to point B. It is not like we robbed a bank. No, I said. You didn't rob a bank. You robbed me. And you used a forged federal document to do it. It is not forgery if we are family, Lila shouted. It is implied consent. Implied consent, I repeated, making sure the microphone caught it clearly. Is that what you think, Ethan? That signing my name without my permission is implied consent? I think you are blowing this out of proportion, Ethan said, crossing his arms. We are talking about a car and a party. We are not talking about Enron. Can we just drop it? Aunt Marjorie is going to be here any second. Do you really want to explain to her that you are trying to send your own mother to jail over a signature? I don't want to send anyone to jail, I lied. I just want the truth. The truth is we needed the money and you didn't, Ethan snapped, his nice guy mask finally slipping. The truth is you are hoarding wealth while Lila is trying to have one special day. So yeah, we used the power of attorney. Get over it. We used the power of attorney. There it was, the confession. Clear as a bell, recorded in high definition. He had just admitted to knowledge and participation. He had tied himself to the crime. I looked at the three of them, my mother, the architect of the guilt, Lila, the beneficiary of the theft, Ethan, the enabler, and the closer. They stood there in the hallway, unified in their delusion. They truly believed that their need justified their actions. They truly believed that because we shared DNA, my property was communal property. I felt a strange sense of peace. The hesitation was gone. The guilt was gone. I wasn't destroying a family. The family was already dead. They had killed it the moment they decided my signature was something they could copy-paste. I looked at my watch. 6:45. Okay, I said. I took my hand out of my pocket. I didn't stop the recording. You are right. We shouldn't make a scene in the hallway. Lila let out a huge breath. She sagged against Ethan. Thank God. Thank you. Piper, seriously, you are being really cool about this. I am just being practical, I said. We should get ready, Mom said, smoothing her hair, her relief palpable. Marjorie will be here any minute. Piper, help me with the table settings. Actually, I said, I think I will handle the seating arrangement. I want to make sure everyone is comfortable. Mom looked at me, suspicious, but too relieved to argue. Fine, just put Marjorie at the head. Oh, she will be at the head, I promised. I walked past them into the dining room. I looked at the rectangular table. Usually, Mom sat at one end, Marjorie at the other, Lila and Ethan on one side, me on the other. Not tonight. I moved the place cards. I put Aunt Marjorie at the head of the table, facing the window. I put my own place card directly to her right, the position of the prosecutor, and then I lined them up. I put Diane, Lila, and Ethan all on the opposite side of the table, facing us. I wanted them sitting in a row. I wanted them to have nowhere to look but at me and Marjorie. I wanted a direct line of sight. I wanted them to feel like a panel of defendants. I adjusted the silverware. I straightened the napkins. I took the tablet out from under my arm and placed it next to my plate. I touched my pocket to ensure the phone was still recording. The air in the house was heavy, charged with the static electricity of a coming storm. I could hear them whispering in the kitchen, congratulating themselves on handling me. They thought they had won. They thought the bribe of $5,000, which they didn't even have, and a guilt trip had worked. They didn't know that I wasn't negotiating. I was just gathering the final exhibits. Then, it happened. Ding dong. The doorbell rang. It was a cheerful, two-tone chime, the sound of arrival, the sound of judgment. I took a deep breath. The air tasted like victory. I will get it, I called out. I walked toward the door. I wasn't going to burn the house down. I was just going to turn on all the lights. And if the glare was too bright for them, if the truth was too ugly to look at, that wasn't my fault. I reached for the handle. It was time to serve the turkey and the subpoenas. The dinner began with the fragile tension of a ceasefire that everyone knows is about to break. Aunt Marjorie sat at the head of the table, her posture impeccable. She ate with small, precise movements, complimenting my mother on the stuffing while completely ignoring the frantic energy radiating from the other side of the table. To an outsider, we looked like a postcard. To me, we looked like a lineup. Diane, Lila, and Ethan sat in a row across from us. They were eating too fast, drinking too much wine, and laughing too loudly at things that were not funny. My mother kept shooting glances at me, her eyes pleading for me to keep the peace. Lila was shredding her napkin under the table. Ethan looked like he was waiting for a trapdoor to open beneath his chair. I ate slowly. I savored every bite. I felt a strange, cold calm settling over me. It was the feeling I always get right before I hand over a final audit report. The numbers are balanced. The evidence is locked. The outcome is inevitable. When the plates were cleared and the pumpkin pie was served, I knew it was time. I picked up my crystal wine glass. I tapped it gently with my fork. Ding, ding, ding. The sound cut through the room like a knife. I would like to propose a toast, I said, standing up. My mother froze. Her hand flew to her throat. Lila stopped chewing. Ethan closed his eyes for a brief second, as if praying for a fire alarm to go off. To Aunt Marjorie, I said, turning my body toward the head of the table. I smiled warmly. It was the only genuine smile I had worn all night. Thank you for coming, and thank you, truly, for the gift you sent to my apartment. The teal bicycle. It was memorable. I paused. I let the word hang there. Marjorie set her glass down. She dabbed her mouth with her linen napkin. She looked at me, confusion knitting her eyebrows together. Then she looked at my mother, then back at me. Bicycle? Marjorie said. Her voice was clear, authoritative, and loud enough to shatter the glass walls of their deception. Piper, what are you talking about? I did not send you a bicycle. I sent you a Mercedes-Benz. The silence that followed was absolute. It was violent. Lila made a choking sound, spurting wine onto her chin. My mother's face went gray, the color draining out of her skin so fast she looked like a corpse. Ethan just stared at the centerpiece, his jaw tight. A Mercedes, I repeated, acting surprised. Are you sure? Because I received a rusted bicycle with a note from Mom saying you wanted me to exercise. I sent you a white Mercedes-Benz C-Class, Marjorie said, her voice rising, hard as steel. I wired $52,000 for the purchase. I arranged it weeks ago. Well, I said, reaching down and picking up my tablet. That is interesting, because I didn't get a Mercedes, but I think I know who did. I placed the tablet in the center of the table. I tapped the screen. The glow illuminated the terror on their faces. Let's look at the ledger, I said. Piper, don't, my mother whispered. It was a weak, pathetic sound. Please. Slide 1, I announced. Ignoring her, the screen displayed the forged power of attorney document. I had enlarged the signature block. This is a power of attorney document submitted to my bank 2 weeks ago, I explained, looking at Marjorie. It grants Diane Evans full access to my accounts. It is signed by Piper Evans. However, I swiped to the next image, the microscopic analysis of the signature. You taught me to be detail-oriented, Aunt Marjorie, I said. And one detail about my signature is that I never dot my I above the letter. I place the dot inside the loop of the P. It is a security measure I adopted years ago. I pointed to the screen. The dot on the forgery was perfectly centered above the I. This signature was traced, I said, and the person who traced it didn't know about the security mark, which means this document is a forgery, and using it is a federal crime. Marjorie looked at the screen. She looked at the signature, then she turned her head slowly to look at her sister. Her expression wasn't angry, it was disgusted. It was the look you give to a cockroach in a fine restaurant. "Diane?" Marjorie asked. One word, an indictment. I was just helping," Mom stammered, tears welling up. "We were going to tell her. It was a loan." "Slide 2, I said, cutting her off. The screen changed to the flow of funds chart. "November 12th, I recited. $52,000 comes in from the Marjorie Kincaid Trust. Memo. Car purchase. November 13th, I continued. $48,000 goes out to Lila E. Concepts, LLC. Lila shrank back in her chair. November 14th, I said. $12,000 to Prestige Motor Cars, $15,000 to the Gilded Estate for a wedding venue. I looked at Lila. You didn't just steal the car. Lila, you stole the wedding. You are paying for your party with the money Aunt Marjorie gave me for my future. Lila burst into tears. It was a loud, ugly, theatrical sobbing. I just wanted a nice wedding. Is that so wrong? You have everything. Piper, you have a career. I have nothing. You have a felony record now, I said calmly. And finally, I said, turning to Ethan. The car. I swiped to the photo of the temporary tag I had taken in the driveway. The Mercedes outside is registered to Diane Evans via power of attorney, I said. But earlier tonight, Ethan, you told the table it was your car. You said you bought it with your bonus. I was confused, Ethan stuttered. I meant I am paying for the gas. I didn't know the details. You didn't know the details? I asked. That is funny. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I tapped the screen. Because I have a recording from 20 minutes ago that says otherwise. I hit play. The volume was all the way up. Ethan's voice filled the room, tinny but unmistakable. The thing with the power of attorney, that was just a formality, okay? We were on a time crunch. We expedited the process. It was procedural. The recording stopped. Ethan looked like he was going to vomit. He had admitted to knowing about the forgery. He had called a felony procedural. Marjorie stood up. She didn't slam the table. She didn't throw her wine. She simply stood up, smoothing her skirt with dignity. The room felt small around her. I have heard enough, Marjorie said. Marjorie, wait, Mom cried, reaching out a hand. We can explain. We will pay it back. Don't be like this. We are family. Marjorie looked at Diane. Her eyes were cold. Blue ice. Family, Marjorie said, is the people who sit at your table and break bread with you. Family is not the people who forge your signature and steal your property. You didn't just steal from Piper. Diane, you stole from me. You took my gift, my generosity, and you turned it into a lie. She turned to me. Piper, call the police. No, Lila shrieked. You can't. Mom, do something. Actually, I said, checking my phone. I already called the bank's fraud department. They are opening a case file as we speak. But I think Aunt Marjorie is right. We need a police report to file the insurance claim. I looked at Ethan. And Ethan, I said, I would call a lawyer if I were you, because when the forensic accountants look at Lila E. Concepts, LLC, and they see your name on the operating agreement, well, let's just say your finance career is going to be very short. Ethan looked at Lila, then he looked at the door. He stood up. I have to go, he said. Ethan? Lila gasped. Where are you going? I didn't sign anything, Ethan said, backing away. I didn't sign the POA. This is on you guys. I am not going to jail for your wedding. He turned and ran. He literally ran out of the dining room. We heard the front door slam seconds later. Lila screamed, a high, piercing sound of absolute devastation. Her fiancé had just abandoned her at the first sign of consequences. Marjorie didn't flinch. She pulled her phone from her purse. She dialed a number. Yes, this is Marjorie Kincaid, she said into the phone. I need to report a theft of funds and a fraudulent vehicle registration. Yes, I am at the location now. Send an officer. She hung up. My mother slumped in her chair, burying her face in her hands. The game was over. The house of cards had collapsed, and it had crushed them. I picked up my tablet. I picked up my wine glass. I finished the wine in one swallow. I think I will go pack, I said. 20 minutes later, I walked out of the house. A police cruiser was pulling into the driveway, the red and blue lights flashing against the white paint of the stolen Mercedes. I saw my mother and Lila standing in the doorway, arguing with the officers, their faces twisted in panic. Aunt Marjorie was waiting for me by her own car. "Piper," she said, "I am sorry it had to be this way." "Aunt Marjorie," I said. "Do not be sorry for the truth," she said firmly. "You did the right thing. You protected yourself, and you exposed the rot. I respect that." She reached into her purse and pulled out a set of keys. "I cannot give you that specific car," she said, nodding at the white Mercedes, which was now evidence. "That one is tainted, but I took the liberty of calling the dealership owner on my way out. He is a friend. He has a black E-Class sedan prepped and waiting for you. It is an upgrade. Consider it a bonus for your forensic work." I took the keys. They were heavy and cold in my hand. "Thank you, Aunt Marjorie," I said. "Go," she said. "Drive back to Chicago. Leave this mess to me. I will handle the prosecution. You just live your life." I walked to my rental car. I grabbed my bag. Then I realized I didn't need the rental anymore. Marjorie's driver was waiting to take me to the dealership. I looked back at the house one last time. I saw Lila crying in the window. I saw my mother trying to charm a police officer who wasn't buying it. I didn't feel sad. I felt light. I felt clean. I got into the back of Marjorie's car. "To the dealership, please," I said. As we drove away, leaving the flashing lights and the suburban nightmare behind, I realized something. They had tried to give me a rusty bicycle to keep me slow, to keep me humble, to keep me quiet, but they forgot who I was. I don't ride bikes, I drive the investigation, and now I drive a Mercedes. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe relaxing at home? Please let me know in the comments below. I really enjoy reading your responses. If you enjoyed seeing justice served, please make sure to subscribe to the Helena Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need a little satisfaction in their day.